Bible in a Year, Chronological Order. Complete Jewish Version. Leviticus chapter 12. Adonai said to Moshe, "Tell the people of Israel, if a woman conceives and gives birth to a boy, she will be unclean for 7 days with the same uncleanness as in Nida, when she is having her menstrual period. On the 8th day, the baby's foreskin is to be circumcised. She is to wait an additional 33 days to be purified from her blood. She is not to touch any holy thing or come in the sanctuary until the time of her purification is over. But if she gives birth to a girl, she will be unclean for 2 weeks, as in her Nida, and she is to wait another 66 days to be purified from her blood. When the days of purification are over, whether for a son or for a daughter, she is to bring a lamb in the first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or dove for a sin offering to the entrance of the tent of meeting to the Kohen. He will offer it before Adonai and make atonement for her. Thus she will be purified from her discharge of blood. Such is the law for a woman who gives birth, whether to a boy or a girl. If she can't afford a lamb, she is to take 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, the one for the burnt offering and the other for the sin offering. The Kohen will make atonement for her, and she will be clean."
Adonai said to Moshe and Aharon, "If someone develops on his skin a swelling, scab, or bright spot, which could develop into the disease Zarahat, he is to be brought to Aharon the Kohen, or to one of his sons who are Kohanim. The Kohen is to examine the sore in his skin. If the hair in the sore has turned white, and the sore appears to go deep into the skin, it is Zarahat. And after examining him, the Kohen is to declare him unclean. If the bright spot on his skin is white, but it does not appear to go deep into the skin, and its hair has not turned white, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine him again, and if the sore appears the same as before and has not upspread on the skin, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 more days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine him again, and if the sore has faded and hasn't spread on the skin, then the Kohen is to declare him clean. It is only a scab, so he is to wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab spreads further on the skin after he has been examined by the Kohen and declared clean, he is to let himself be examined yet again by the Kohen. The Kohen will examine him, and if he sees that the scab has spread on his skin, then the Kohen will declare him unclean. It is Zaraat. If a person has Zaraat, he is to be brought to the Kohen. The Kohen is to examine him, and if he sees that there is a white swelling in the skin, which has turned the hair white and inflamed flesh in the swelling, then it is chronic Zaraat on his skin, and the Kohen is to declare him unclean. He is not to isolate him, because it is already clear that he is unclean. If the Zaraat breaks out all over the skin, so that as far as the Kohen can see, the person with Zarahat has sores everywhere on his body, from his head to his feet, then the Kohen is to examine him, and if he sees that the Zaraat has covered his entire body, he is to pronounce the person with the sores clean. It has all turned white, and he is clean. But if one day inflamed flesh appears on him, he will be unclean. The Kohen will examine the inflamed flesh and declare him unclean. The inflamed flesh is unclean. It is Zarahat. However, if the inflamed flesh again turns white, he is to come to the Kohen. The Kohen will examine him, and if he sees that the sores have turned white, then the Kohen is to declare clean the person with the sores. He is clean. If a person has on his skin a boil that heals in such a way that in place of the boil there is a white swelling or a reddish-white bright spot, it is to be shown to the Kohen. The Kohen is to examine it. If he sees that it appears to be more than skin deep, and its hair has turned white, then the Kohen is to pronounce him unclean. The disease of Zarahat has broken out in the boil. But if the Kohen looks at it and doesn't see any white hairs in it, and it isn't more than skin deep but appears faded, the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. If it spreads on the skin, the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is the disease. But if the bright spot stays where it was and has not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the Kohen is to declare him clean. Or if someone has on his skin a burn caused by fire, and the inflamed flesh where it was burned has become a bright spot, reddish white, or white, then the Kohen is to examine it. And if he sees that the hair in the bright spot has turned white, and that it appears to be deeper than the skin around it, it is zarat. It has broken out in the burn, and the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is a sore from zarat. But if the Kohen examines it and sees no white hair in the bright spot, and it is no lower than the skin around it, but looks faded, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine him. If it has spread on the skin, then the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is a sore from zarat. But if the bright spot stays where it was and has not spread on the skin, but appears faded, it is a swelling due to the burn, and the Kohen is to declare him clean, because it is only a scar from the burn. If a man or woman has a sore on the head or a man in his beard, then the Kohen is to examine the sore. If he sees that it appears to be deeper than the skin around it, with yellow, thin hair in it, then the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is a crusted area, a zarat of the head or beard. If the Kohen examines the diseased crusted area and sees that it appears not to be deeper than the skin around it and without any black hair in it, then the Kohen is to isolate for 7 days the person with the diseased crusted area. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine the sore, and if he sees that the crusted area hasn't spread, that it has no yellow hair in it, and that the crusted area is not deeper than the skin around it, then the person is to be shaved, except for the crusted area itself, and the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 more days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine the crusted area, and if he sees that the crusted area has not spread on the skin and does not appear to be deeper than the skin around it, then the Kohen is to declare him clean. He is to wash his clothes and be clean. But if the crusted area spread after his purification, then the Kohen is to examine him. And if he sees that the crusted area has spread on the skin, the Kohen is not to look for yellow hair. He is unclean. But if the crusted area's appearance doesn't change and black hair grows up in it, then the crusted area is healed. He is clean, and the Kohen is to declare him clean. And the Kohen is to declare him clean. If a man or woman has bright spots on his skin, bright white spots, then the Kohen is to examine them. If he sees that the bright spots on the skin are dull white, it is only a rash that has broken out on the skin. He is clean. If a man's hair has fallen from his scalp, he is bald, but he is clean. If his hair has fallen off the front part of his head, he is forehead bald, but he is clean. But if on the bald scalp or forehead there is a reddish white sore, it is zarat, breaking out on his bald scalp or forehead. Then the Kohen is to examine him. If he sees that there is a reddish white swelling on his bald scalp or forehead, appearing like zarat on the rest of the body, he is a person with zarat. He is unclean. The Kohen must declare him unclean. The sore is on his head. Everyone who has zarat sores is to wear torn clothes and unbound hair, cover his upper lip and cry, "Unclean, unclean." As long as he has sores, he will be unclean. Since he is unclean, he must live in isolation. He must live outside the camp. When zarat infects an article of clothing, whether it be a woolen or a linen garment, on the threads or the woven in parts of either linen or wool, or on a hide or item made of leather, then if the stain on the garment, hide, threads, woven in parts, or leather item is greenish or reddish, it is an infection of Zarat and is to be shown to the Kohen. The Kohen is to examine the stain and isolate the article that has the infection for 7 days. On the seventh day, he is to examine the stain. If the stain has spread on the garment, threads woven in parts, or leather, whatever its use, the infection is a contagious Zaraat. The garment is unclean. He is to burn the garment threads, woven in parts, of either wool or linen, or item of leather having the infection, for it is a contagious Zaraat. It must be burned up completely. But if when the Kohen examines it, he sees that infection has not spread on the garment or in the threads, woven in parts or leather item, then the Kohen is to order that the article having the infection be washed and isolated for 7 more days. The Kohen is to examine it after the stain has been washed, and if he sees that the stain has not changed color, then even though the stain is not spread, it is unclean. You are to burn it up completely. It is rotten, no matter whether the spot is on the outside or on the inside. If the Kohen examines it and sees that the stain has faded after being washed, then he is to tear the stain out of the garment, leather, threads, or woven in parts. If it appears again in the garment, threads, woven in parts, or leather item, it is contagious, and you are to burn up completely the article that had the stain. But if the infection is gone from the garment, threads, woven in parts, or leather item that you washed, then is to be washed a second time, and it will be clean. This is the law concerning infections of Zaraat in a garment of wool or linen, or in the threads, or woven in parts, or in any leather item, when to declare it clean and when to declare it unclean. Adonai said to Moshe, "This is to be the law concerning the person afflicted with Zaraat on the day of his purification. He is to be brought to the Kohen, and the Kohen is to go outside the camp and examine him there. If he sees that the Zaraat sores have been healed in the afflicted person, then the Kohen will order that 2 living clean birds be taken for the one to be purified, along with cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop leaves. The Kohen is to order one of the birds slaughtered in a clay pot over running water. As for the live bird, he is to take it with the cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop, and dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird slaughtered over running water, and sprinkle the person to be purified from the Zaraat 7 times. Next, he is to set the live bird free in an open field. He who is to be purified must wash his clothes, shave off all his hair, and bathe himself in water. Then he will be clean, and after that he may enter the camp, but he must live outside his tent for 7 days. On the 7th day, he is to shave all the hair off his head, also his beard and eyebrows. He must shave off all his hair, and he is to wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and he will be clean. On the 8th day, he is to take 2 male lambs without defect, 1 female lamb in its first year without defect, and 6½ quarts of fine flour for a grain offering mixed with olive oil, and 2/3 of a pint of olive oil. The Kohen, purifying him, is to place the person being purified with these items before Adonai at the entrance to the tent of meeting. The Kohen is to take one of the male lambs and offer it as a guilt offering with the 2/3 pint of olive oil, then wave them as a wave offering before Adonai. He is to slaughter the male lamb at the place in the sanctuary for slaughtering sin offerings and burnt offerings, because the guilt offering belongs to the Kohen, just like the sin offering. It is especially holy. The Kohen is to take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the tip of the right ear of the person being purified, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. Next, the Kohen is to take some of the 2/3 pint of olive oil and pour it into the palm of his own left hand, dip his right finger in the oil that is in his left hand, and sprinkle from the oil with his finger 7 times before Adonai. Then the Kohen is to put some of the remaining oil in his hand on the tip of the right ear of the person being purified, on the thumb of his right hand, on the big toe of his right foot, and on the blood of the guilt offering. Finally, the Kohen is to put the rest of the oil in his hand on the head of the person being purified, and the Kohen will make atonement for him before Adonai. The Kohen is to offer the sin offering and make atonement for the person being purified because of his uncleanness. Afterwards, he is to slaughter the burnt offering. The Kohen is to offer the burnt offering and grain offering on the altar. Thus the Kohen will make the atonement for him, and he will be clean. If he is poor so that he can't afford to do otherwise, he is to take 1 male lamb as a guilt offering to be waved, to make atonement for him, 2 quarts of fine flour mixed with olive oil for a grain offering, 2/3 of a pint of olive oil, and 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, such as he can afford, the one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. On the 8th day he will bring them to the Kohen for his purification, to the entrance of the tent of meeting before Adonai. The Kohen is to take the lamb of the guilt offering and the 2/3 of a pint of olive oil and wave them as a wave offering before Adonai. He is to slaughter the lamb of the guilt offering, and the Kohen is to take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the tip of the right ear of the person being purified, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. The Kohen is to take some of the olive oil and pour it into the palm of his own left hand, and sprinkle with his right hand some of the oil that is in his left hand 7 times before Adonai. The Kohen is to put some of the oil in his hand on the tip of the right ear of the person being purified, on the thumb of his right hand, on the big toe of his right foot, in the same place as the blood of the guilt offering. Finally, the Kohen is to put the rest of the oil in his hand on the head of the person being purified, to make atonement for him before Adonai. He is to offer 1 of the doves or young pigeons, such as the person can afford, whatever his means suffice for, the one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering, with the grain offering. Thus the Kohen will make atonement before Adonai for the person being purified. Such is the law for the person who has Zaraat sores if he cannot afford the usual elements used for his purification.